Please rise for the presentation of colors.
Colors, right face. Present, colors. Order, colors. Colors, forward, march.
You may be seated. The presentation of colors and our national anthem was presented by St. Louis Public Schools Gateway STEM students. Good morning. Oh, I know you're awake. Good morning.
Good morning.
I am so proud and so pleased that so many of you have taken time from your busy day to join us today. This morning we'll have a presentation of a legislative platform that not only benefits St. Louis Public Schools and the city of St. Louis, the students and families that live throughout this area, but also a platform that will benefit everyone in the state of Missouri. We need your voices, your comments, your commitment to be able to provide educational services for students of the city of St. Louis, the surrounding areas, and remember, when we look at counties, the largest section of a county is St. Louis County, and the words, the title, the name St. Louis carries a lot of weight throughout this country. We are going to make everyone proud. We need your voice. We need your commitment. At this time, I'd like to present Dr. Myra Berry, our interim superintendent for St. Louis Public Schools.
Good morning, distinguished members of the Missouri Legislature, city officials, esteemed guests, and our partners in education. It is my privilege as interim superintendent of St. Louis Public Schools to welcome you to our annual legislative breakfast. We are grateful for your presence and for your continued dialogue and partnership that this event represents. St. Louis Public Schools stands at an important moment in its trajectory. Our work strengthening academic outcomes, enhancing operational excellence, and ensuring safe, supportive environments for every student requires a collective commitment. We recognize that meaningful progress is possible only when city and state leaders, along with local educators, move forward in concert, aligned with purpose and guided by the need of our children. Your leadership at the state and local level directly influences our ability to deliver high-quality instruction, recruit and retain exceptional educators, and provide the resources needed for our students to thrive. We value that partnership, and we are committed to being transparent in our communication, responsible with our stewardship, and the consistent pursuit of improvement. As we look ahead, our pledge is simple. We will continue advancing this work with urgency, with integrity, and with a deep belief in the potential of every student we serve. And we invite you to continue moving forward with us, together, towards a stronger future for the students and families of St. Louis. Again, this is our city, our commitment. We thank you for your service to the state of Missouri, the city of St. Louis, and for your ongoing support to the students, staff, and families of St. Louis Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. The St. Louis Public Schools proposed 2026 legislative platform is a powerful affirmation of our unyielding commitment to every student. Our core mission is to build a collaborative community of lifelong learners, and to achieve this, we must ensure we have the resources and local authority needed to help all of our students survive. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Steve Carroll, our lobbyist.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I am Steve Carroll. I am president of Carroll & Associates, government relations, law firm, lobbying firm. And it has been my honor, and let me repeat, privilege and honor to represent the St. Louis Public Schools for the last 27 years. I've worked for a lot of different board members and superintendents, but we always have the same goals in mind, and that is to make sure that we do everything we can for the children of the city of St. Louis and public schools. And so I'm grateful. My firm, we represent a lot of various clients, but without a doubt, St. Louis Public Schools has been the closest one to my heart. I'm proud that Rodney Hubbard is here. He's part of our team. He works very hard on behalf of the children of the city of St. Louis as well. So Rodney, glad to see you here. You know, when I first was hired in 1997, it was a 12-member board at the time. Hattie Jackson was the president. And they didn't have a legislative platform at that time, the first year that I worked for them. The second year I said, why don't you let me work up a legislative platform and see if we can come to an agreement on it, because I think we need to have an agenda in Jefferson City, because it's a constant changing climate there in the halls of the Capitol. As a former legislator who was heavily involved in public education, I can tell you that I'm proud to still be working on public education, but it's a constant challenge on trying to move an education agenda forward there. But we've been very successful, I think, over the years, and we continue to do so. So I'm happy that the Legislative Committee and the board has adopted this 2026 legislative platform. And you have it there in your folder. There's just a few key provisions that I would like to go over. Our key legislative priorities: we strongly support local control and governance of school districts by the locally elected school board. We think that's very important, that the citizens of each school district elect their school board members to have local control to run that district, so that the citizens have a voice and an input. We support full funding of the state transportation formula for school districts. You know, when the state doesn't provide that 75%, the school districts have to find the resources from other places, and it comes out of the classroom. And that shouldn't occur. And so that's why it's so important, especially with the city of St. Louis. We don't get a lot through the regular formula, so it's even more important that we fully fund that transportation formula for us. And then not to mention, we're trying to get away from the so-called 30% inefficiency ratio that we get. If you don't have an efficient transportation system, the state of Missouri, DESE, can withhold 30% of your transportation funding. We always get hit with that 30% hit because we include our magnet school transportation, which was part of the D6 settlement agreement, and we don't think that's fair. We have to run that regardless, and it's the most inefficient transportation there is, and no other school district has to deal with that. So we're working on trying to get rid of the so-called FIRE, is what they call it, inefficiency. Also, we support legislation states for any new charter school is allowed to operate. They first must maintain a certificate of need from the state board and also have the local elected board agree with it as well. There was a legislation introduced last year by Senator Nurnberg that did just this, and we do support that. You just can't keep opening up new schools when you have fewer and fewer students. It just doesn't make any sense, and we need to have a good policy on that. We also support input from the public education groups to work with the governor's task force. Currently, the governor has a task force on rewriting the foundation formula where they will have to make the recommendations by December of 2026. Now, we've heard out of the governor's office that he wants a new formula, but he doesn't want to spend any more money than what we're currently spending now. And I don't know how you can move ahead with public education without the additional funding that we need. You know, we have some of the weighted factors in the current formula. Under the old formula, before this new formula went into effect, we had the weighted factors for free and reduced lunch and special education. But back in 2005 through 2007, we decided, you know what, we need to have something for English as second language. And so they added a weighted factor for that. Now there's talk also that there should be a weighted factor for students with high mobility or homelessness, because that is a constant problem in the urban areas without a doubt. So we want to work with the task force, but we want to make sure that any new formula is going to take care of the challenges that are out there in the future. Also, we oppose any legislation proposals that would divert taxpayers' dollars from public education to non-public entities. Obviously, you know, the $50 million that they put in the voucher ESA program last year, general revenue, because quite frankly, the tax credits weren't working for them because not that many people were involved with it. And so they took and put $50 million in. This year they're talking about adding another 50 to make it 100 million. And we think that's wrong. There's a lawsuit right now because they didn't change the law when they did. They just put in GR instead of using the tax credit. The way the current language is written, it's for tax credits, not GR. So we'll see if there's any new legislation to try to get around that this year. I'm sure there will be, certainly with the lawsuit currently going on to keep them from spending the GR. Not to mention last year, when the governor found $50 million for ESA program, he didn't want to fully fund the formula under Senate Bill 727, withholding $400 million. Now, thank goodness that the legislature disagreed with him, and they put the $400 million in to fully fund and keep their promise on Senate Bill 727. So we'll be watching that very closely again this year. And then we support fair and equitable real property and personal property tax legislation or proposals. You know, the special session this year just did some crazy things with property taxes. And nobody likes to pay more taxes than you have to. We get that. But under the way that we're funded in Missouri, the state funds very little to our public schools. I mean, you rely on property taxes, personal property taxes, just the way it is. So we think that any changes there, we should have some solid tax proposals that doesn't shift the burden too far one way or the other. We think that's very important. So those are some of our key legislative priorities that we'll be looking at. I'm not going to go into all of them. You have them there before you. I do want to touch on, though, a couple on the back page on the local control issues that we think is important. We don't think that the state needs to mandate the local school districts about superintendent salaries, working conditions, class sizes. I mean, Big Brother doesn't need to be overseeing that. That needs to be left to the local school board because every school district is different and has their own needs. And so we find that to be very important. We also continue to believe in having nonpartisan school board elections and those elections in April. Good public solid education knows no party, Democrat, Republican. It knows whether you support public education or not. And we feel like also that the elections should continue in April. We don't want to get bogged down with so many other elections in November. So we continue to support that. And we strongly oppose open enrollment. We don't think school districts need to be competing with each other marketing. They need to keep their money in the classroom for the resources that they need and let the state finally fully fund the programs that we need. And then also we support lowering the compulsory age for students to start school at 5 years of age instead of current 7. I mean, it just makes sense. Our kids are starting to learn 3 and 4 year old. I mean, I've got a grandchild that was reading out of the encyclopedia when he was 4 years old. You know, we need to get them in school and the parents be involved. You know, and if it's only for the city of St. Louis, so be it. We think it should be statewide. But to give you an example of our legislative platform back in 2005, back then, you could drop out of school at 16. And we said, we would like to raise it to 17. We think it makes sense, not to mention because of the DSEG settlement agreement, we had to hit a certain percentage points of graduation rate. And so we were able to sell that to the legislature in an effort to keep us in compliance with the DSEG settlement agreement. And they bought into it, and they passed that legislation just for us. Well, when you know, 4 years later, they thought it was such a good idea, it's statewide now. So we feel like this is good common sense legislation, and we look forward to working with legislators to get it done. Now, I realize, and the board realizes as well, that not everything in our platform everybody's going to agree with. That's just the way it is in Jefferson City. It's a democratic process. But we feel that this is in the best interest of the students we serve, and quite frankly, many of our proposals we feel are in the best interest of all the students in the state. So this is our platform. We're sticking with it, you know. So it's going to be a rough legislative session, I think, in a lot of ways. There's going to be a tight budget, obviously. And, you know, Mark Twain once stated that no man's house, property, money, or dog is safe while the legislature's in session. So, you know, that could be true. We'll have to wait and see this year. But we're going to go down to Jeff City for that 5-month session. We're going to give it all we can for the children that we serve here in the city of St. Louis. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll. And in just a few minutes, we're going to open the floor for questions, comments. Your input is extremely important. Well, we need to be able to move forward and know that we have the support, but we don't know everything that we need to know to be able to make this work. Your input is very valuable to us. So with that, our live stream will be ending, and we will now open the floor for comments and questions, and I do have a microphone I will